For 3 years, the mole cricket destroyed everything I had. Seedlings, roots, onions. Until an elderly man said, "Bury one thing in each corner of your plot, and I'll show you something you won't find in any gardening store." Today, I will tell you a story that will make you look at your garden with completely different eyes. A story that began with total failure and ended with a method so simple, it's hard to believe. But first things first. When I saw my tomatoes falling one by one, as if someone were mowing them down with an invisible scythe just below the ground, I was ready to sell the plot. I literally posted an ad in my head because no other solution came to mind. The roots were chewed through, and the seedlings were dying right before my eyes, literally overnight. I would go out to the garden bed in the morning, and another bush would be lying flat on the ground, as if someone had cut it with scissors right at the base. My neighbor, an agronomist by education, came over, inspected the damage, shook his head, and said one sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. "It's the mole cricket. You can consider your season over." Just like that. A few words and a death sentence for all my hard work. So I started looking for a rescue online. I ordered expensive chemical products, the ones with colorful packaging and promises of immediate results. I spent a fortune, and then, quite by chance, I met old Grandpa Vasil by the fence. He was a neighbor from across the street, a quiet old man who always had the most beautiful garden in the neighborhood. He smiled, looking at my pained expression, and said, "What are you trying to poison with chemicals?" "You're foolish, boy. I've been gardening for 40 years and haven't seen a single mole cricket in my beds." I didn't believe him. I was convinced it was some fairy tale. But he showed me something truly strange. And what turned out to be the case? In just 2 days, all the mole crickets simply fled my garden for good. I tested this method for 3 more consecutive seasons. Not a single pest. I'll tell you exactly what he told me to bury in the corners of the garden beds in a moment. This method works flawlessly, and you definitely have the necessary ingredient at home, or you can buy it for pennies at the nearest store. But before I reveal Grandpa Vassel's secret, you need to understand who we are really dealing with, because the mole cricket is no ordinary garden bug. It's a true underground tank, perfectly designed by nature to destroy your hard work. If you've ever seen one in person, you know what a terrifying sight it is. The mole cricket reaches a length of 2 to 3 inches, and its body is covered with dense, fine hairs that shine in the sun like silk. But the worst part is its front legs. Powerful digging claws that incredibly resemble crab pincers or mole paws. It uses them to tear through the earth, chewing through everything it encounters on its way. I remember my initial shock when I dug this creature up with a shovel. I stood there with my mouth open because it looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, not a regular garden insect. But the surprises don't end there. The mole cricket doesn't just dig tunnels underground, it can fly, and over quite long distances at that. Plus, it's an excellent swimmer. So if you think you can just flood its burrow with water and be done with it, forget it. It will simply swim out or fly over to the neighbor's yard, and in a few days it will return as if nothing happened. The mole cricket is primarily nocturnal, digging its endless labyrinths at a depth of 4 to 8 inches. Right there in the upper layer of fertile soil is where the roots of your best seedlings are located. Catching it by hand is practically impossible. It senses the slightest vibration in the ground and instantly goes deeper, out of the shovel's reach. The scale of destruction that even a single family of mole crickets can cause is simply staggering. I experienced this firsthand. In a single night, this pest can destroy up to 5 freshly planted seedlings. It doesn't eat the root entirely. It just needs to clear a path, so it bites through the stem like sharp scissors. It absolutely loves tomatoes, cucumbers, potatoes, and young cabbage. Statistics show that in heavily infested areas, gardeners lose up to 40% of their crops if they don't take action in time. For me, these weren't abstract numbers from a guidebook. They were empty garden beds where healthy, strong bushes should have stood. And how do you even recognize that you have this enemy on your plot if you haven't seen it yet? The first sign is a wilting plant. If yesterday the bush stood straight and healthy, and today it's lying on the ground, dig around it with a shovel. Most likely the root is no longer there. The second sign, winding ridges of dirt on the surface, especially visible after rain or watering. This is the roof of its tunnels, raised above the soil surface. The third sign, small round holes in the ground. roughly the diameter of a thumb, and of course, the characteristic sound. On warm evenings, mole crickets sing. It's a sharp, loud chirping that you won't confuse with anything else. If you hear this coming from the ground, it's time to sound the alarm. When I started my battle with the mole cricket, I did exactly what most of you do. I ran to the gardening store for chemicals. The shelves were groaning under the weight of colorful packages. Medvitox here, Grizzly there, Phenoxin Plus next to it. Manufacturers promise instant results. The principle behind these insecticides is simple. You bury poison seeds or granules in the soil, the insect eats them, and it dies. It seems logical, but in practice, I encountered huge problems. First, chemicals don't provide a 100% result. The mole cricket is an incredibly cautious creature with an excellent sense of smell. If the bait smells even slightly suspicious, it will simply bypass it and move on. Second, it's a huge risk to your plot's ecosystem. These poisons kill not only pests, but also beneficial earthworms, without which the soil turns into concrete, hardens, stops breathing, and loses its structure. And the worst part is the danger to pets. My cat was always trying to dig something up in the garden beds, and I couldn't sleep peacefully, fearing he would stumble upon those poisoned granules. And let's not forget, chemicals accumulate in the soil and, consequently, in your future vegetables. After all, we grow our own food to eat clean products, but in the end, we poison the earth with pesticides. Do you see the irony? Disappointed with store-bought products, I turned to folk wisdom. What didn't I try? I can't even believe now how much time and energy I spent on it. I flooded the burrows with soapy water and even a kerosene solution. The effect was, to put it mildly, temporary. Sure, a few would crawl to the surface, you'd catch them, but hundreds of others sat quietly deep down and didn't even flinch. Plus, kerosene terribly destroys the soil structure. Then nothing grows there for years because the soil is dead. Beer traps are a whole different story. Yes, the smell of malt attracts the mole cricket. The insect crawls into the jar and drowns. But how many will you catch with this method? 5, maybe 10, and there are thousands of them on the plot. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Absurd math. The eggshell method also turned out to be a myth. Supposedly, the sharp edges of the shells injure the insect. In reality, the mole cricket simply pushes them aside with its powerful legs and keeps going. It digs tunnels in hard clay, so what's a little eggshell to it? Many advise planting marigolds or chrysanthemums along the beds because supposedly their scent repels the pest. To be honest, on my plot, the mole cricket calmly dug tunnels right under the roots of those marigolds. Clearly, it hadn't read the guidebook and didn't know it was supposed to be afraid. All these methods yield at best a partial, short-term result. You spend time, energy, and money, while the pest quietly goes about its dark business underground. That's exactly why, when Grandpa Vassal suggested his method, I was extremely skeptical. I thought to myself, if modern science and gallons of kerosene didn't help, what difference will some grandpa's trick make? But I was wrong, and I'll tell you why in a moment. I remember that evening in the finest detail. The sun was setting, the sky was orange, and I stood over another destroyed cucumber bed, feeling like crying. Weeks of work for nothing. And then from behind the neighbor's fence came that raspy but jovial voice of Grandpa Vassal. He squinted, looked at my empty seedling holes and said, "Still fighting. Throw away those bottles of chemicals. You're only ruining the soil. Come over here." I walked over thinking I was about to hear another story about the lunar calendar or some magic spells, but Grandpa Vassal started talking about completely down-to-earth things. He told me that his father and grandfather, long before all these store-bought products appeared, knew a secret that drives the mole cricket off the plot in a matter of hours. Vasil Pavlovich is a gardener with a level of experience I couldn't even dream of. On his quarter-acre plot, everything always bloomed, and he had so much harvest that he gave it away to the whole neighborhood. I asked him, "Vasil Pavlovich, don't keep me in suspense. What do you bury in the corners?" He smiled under his mustache, looked around as if he were revealing a state secret, and said, "Fish, son, plain, raw fish. But not just any way, you have to do it smart." At first I laughed. I was sure he was joking. But the old man was completely serious. It turned out that this method is based on the biology of the pest itself and its phenomenal sense of smell. So remember this well or write it down, because this knowledge will save you thousands of dollars and a lot of nerves. Hey, before we get into the details, if you have a plot, a garden, or are simply interested in how to deal with pests without chemicals, hit subscribe and the bell icon. This channel regularly features proven gardening tricks, ones that actually work, not just look good on the packaging. All right, back to Grandpa Vasil and his fish. Grandpa Vasil's secret lies in using fish scraps. Any cheap fish will do. Sprat, capelin, sardine, or even just fish heads and guts that you would normally throw in the trash. The essence of the method is this. As the fish decomposes, it releases a specific odor and decay products, including ammonia, which are absolutely unbearable for the mole cricket. To it, this smell is a signal of mortal danger, a sign that the soil is contaminated with putrefactive products and inhospitable to life. But you need to know how to do it right. The old man told me to follow the instructions strictly. The best time is spring, when the ground has already warmed up and the mole cricket starts actively digging its tunnels, or autumn, when it's looking for a place to winter. You need a small amount of fish scraps, literally 1 or 2 small fish or a couple of heads per spot. First, you mark the boundaries of your plot or a specific garden bed. Grandpa Vassal insisted, you must bury them strictly in the corners and every 10 to 13 feet along the perimeter. The procedure is as follows. You dig a small hole about 8 to 10 inches deep. This is exactly the level where the mole cricket's main highways run. You put the fish in there. If you want the method to work instantly, it's better to keep the fish in a warm place for a day beforehand, so it starts, let's say, gently releasing its aroma. Then you fill the hole with soil and tamp it down well. You won't smell anything on the surface. I promise. Your nose won't catch it, but the mole cricket's sensitive olfactory organs certainly will. And how? Why does it work in exactly 2 days? The mole cricket has a very complex spatial orientation system. It constantly scans the soil for food and threats. When the fish decay products start spreading in the corners of the plot, it creates an encirclement effect for the insect. Wherever it turns, it senses this sharp, terrifying smell everywhere. To the insect, it's not just unpleasant. It's a signal that the territory is uninhabitable and unsuitable for raising offspring. In a panic, the pest starts fleeing in the only free direction, away from your plot. Science confirms this method. As fish decomposes, it releases nitrogen compounds and hydrogen sulfide. In small concentrations underground, these substances act as the most powerful repellent. The mole cricket literally suffocates in its tunnels and tries to leave the danger zone as quickly as possible. And most importantly, this method is absolutely eco-friendly. Over time, the fish will simply turn into an excellent phosphorus fertilizer for your plants. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You drive away the pest and fertilize the soil. Can it get any better? I don't think so. When I did this for the first time, I admit, I ran to check the beds every hour. On the first day, nothing special happened. I even got sad. I thought Grandpa Vassal had just played a joke on me. But on the second morning, I noticed something strange. On the paths between the beds, where the ground was usually flat and smooth, I saw several mole crickets that had crawled up to the surface. They looked disoriented, moved chaotically, and were clearly heading toward the fence toward the neighboring abandoned plot. By the evening of the second day, new dirt ridges stopped appearing. I purposely watered the ground to see if fresh tunnels would appear by morning. The next day, the soil remained perfectly flat. The seedlings, which just yesterday stood wilted and sad, seemed to come back to life. I couldn't believe my own eyes. The pest that had tormented me for years disappeared in literally 48 hours. It looked like a miracle, but it was just the chemistry of nature. Simple, effective, and brilliant in its simplicity. I decided to conduct an experiment and told my neighbor Pasha about this method. Pasha is a city guy. He doesn't believe in folk wisdom. He only acknowledges expensive German chemicals and professional products. But that year, the mole cricket devoured almost all his potatoes, so he waved off his skepticism and decided to give it a try. We buried herring heads in the corners of his potato field. 3 days later, Pasha came to me with eyes as big as saucers. He said he saw mole crickets literally marching in a column through the ditch toward the woods. Since then, he hasn't even mentioned chemicals. Personally, I've been using this method for the fourth season in a row. I do it preventively at the end of April. And you know what my result is? Over all these years, I haven't lost a single seedling bush. Not a single one. My tomatoes now survive all the way to autumn, and I pull clean potatoes out of the ground without those nightmare holes and chewed up chunks. The long-term effect of this method is that you create an invisible protective barrier on your plot. The mole cricket is a creature with good genetic memory. If it sensed danger here once, it won't return the next season. And even if random individuals fly over from the neighbors, they will quickly realize they aren't welcome here. The most important thing is to renew these fish deposits once a year, and your garden will be under solid protection. This is proven by time, my experience, and dozens of gardeners I've managed to tell about it. Of course, Grandpa Vassal's fish method is my favorite, my gold standard. But I understand that situations vary. Sometimes a plot is so neglected that just fish in the corners won't cut it. Or, for example, you live near a fish processing plant, and the mole crickets have already gotten used to everything. That's why over the years I've compiled a whole file of other effective methods that can be used as a powerful supplement. One of the oldest and most reliable methods is manure traps. The mole cricket absolutely loves fresh cow manure. To it, it's both a restaurant and the best maternity ward in the world. In early May, I dig a few holes on the plot about 20 inches deep and fill them with manure. Mole crickets flock there from all over the area. After 3 weeks, I simply dig up these holes and eliminate the pests along with their egg clutches. And in the fall, in October, I prepare the same winter quarters. When the first frosts hit, I just scatter this manure over the surface. The mole crickets that set up their winter camp there instantly die from the cold. It's a great way to reduce the population tenfold without any chemicals. If you've noticed a fresh tunnel right in the middle of a garden bed and don't want to wait, there's a quick method: the oil trap. I take plain water, add a few tablespoons of unrefined sunflower oil, and pour it into the burrow. The oil forms a thin film on the insect's body, clogging its breathing spiracles. The mole cricket either suffocates underground or jumps to the surface in a panic, where I'm already waiting for it with a shovel. Another good option is a hot pepper infusion. For 2.5 gallons of water, I take 3.5 ounces of ground red pepper, let it steep for a day, and pour it into the tunnels. Believe me, after such spicy cuisine, the mole cricket changes its address very quickly. Many of my friends praise the use of pine needles. When planting potatoes or tomato seedlings, they add a handful of pine or spruce needles to each hole. The mole cricket can't stand the smell or the prickly texture. This, of course, won't drive it off the entire plot, but it will protect a specific plant. The same goes for onion skins. If you've been collecting them all winter, don't throw them away. Put them under the roots. The smell of rotting onion skins is extremely unpleasant for this pest. And speaking of a modern approach, I can't fail to mention biological preparations. This isn't the chemistry we're all afraid of. These are products based on natural fungi, such as Metarhizium or Bovaria. These fungi live in the soil and attack only insects and pests, without harming earthworms, plants, or us. The fungus penetrates inside the mole cricket, and the insect dies in a completely natural way. I often combine the grandpa's method with watering using such biopreparations at the beginning of the season. It results in a double strike that is impossible to defend against. You have to understand one thing. Fighting the mole cricket is always a complex of actions. You can't just bury something and forget about the garden for 5 years. For example, I make it a rule to do a deep tilling of the soil in the fall. This destroys their winter chambers and tears up their tunnels. Besides that, I encourage hedgehogs and birds to visit the plot by all means possible. One hedgehog in a single night can eat as many mole crickets as you wouldn't catch in a whole week. Build it a small house out of branches in the corner of the garden, and it will become your best ally. Is there an easier way for natural pest control? Probably not. Do you know what a gardener's biggest mistake is? Thinking that since there are no mole crickets this year, they won't appear next year. This pest is a true colonizer. Most often, we bring the enemy to our plot ourselves. I remember when my neighbor bought a trailer of great compost at a bargain price. A week later, his entire garden started moving. With manure or imported soil, hundreds of eggs and young individuals can arrive at your place. Therefore, my advice is, never dump imported soil directly onto your garden beds. Inspect it carefully and ideally let it sit separately. Treat it with biopreparations or make trial manure traps. If your plot borders an abandoned area or a damp meadow, you are in the risk zone. The mole cricket loves damp places rich in organic matter. In such cases, I recommend creating mechanical barriers. Some people dig sheets of fiber cement or fine metal mesh along the perimeter to a depth of up to 20 inches. It's labor-intensive, but incredibly effective. The mole cricket simply won't be able to dig its way to your side from the neighbors. Another important aspect of prevention is proper watering. The mole cricket loves moist soil. If you flood the garden every evening, you're creating an ideal resort for it. I try to use drip irrigation or water less frequently, but more abundantly, so the top layer of soil has time to dry out. I've also noticed that mulching with dark materials, for example, black landscape fabric, attracts the mole cricket because the ground heats up faster underneath it. In areas threatened by the mole cricket, it's better to use light mulch, straw, or hay. They reflect the sun's rays and the soil beneath them stays cooler. Regular monitoring is something that should become a habit for you. Every morning I walk along the paths. If I see a fresh burrow, I react immediately. I don't wait for the pest to reach the greenhouse. Early diagnosis allows you to nip the problem in the bud before the insect manages to lay thousands of eggs. And remember, one female produces an offspring of 300 to 500 individuals in a season. The math here does not work in our favor. Therefore, vigilance is our main weapon. Can you afford to ignore such statistics? The answer is obvious. Over the years of running the channel and talking to gardeners, I've heard so many myths that you could write a book. One of the most persistent is the belief in ultrasonic repellers. People spend huge amounts of money on these miracle stakes, stick them all over the plot, and wait for a miracle. I personally tested 3 different models, and you know what? The mole cricket calmly dug a tunnel 2 inches away from the working device. These creatures adapt perfectly to vibrations, and no ultrasound will scare them away. Don't throw your money down the drain. Another illusion. If my plot is perfectly tidy and weed-free, the mole cricket won't come. Not true. Quite the opposite. The mole cricket loves well-kept, fertilized, regularly watered gardens. It's much tastier for it there than in an overgrown wasteland. A clean plot is not a guarantee of safety, but simply a more comfortable hunting ground for this pest. A typical mistake is also the wrong timing for applying methods. Many gardeners start fighting the mole cricket in July, when it has already laid its eggs and gone deep underground. This is practically pointless. The main strike must be delivered in May and June during the period of its maximum activity and reproduction. And the second mistake, lack of consistency. You buried the fish once and figured the matter was settled for 10 years ahead. The method works, but beyond the borders of your plot, life goes on, and new intruders can appear at any moment. And of course, panic. When a gardener sees 3 knocked-over bushes, they start pouring everything into the ground blindly. Gasoline, chlorine, dichlorvos. This way, you're not killing the mole cricket, you're killing your soil. Remember that your task is not to turn the plot into a scorched desert, but to make it unattractive to a specific pest. Cold calculation and proven grandpa's methods always work better than the hysterical use of poisons. And that is my personal conclusion after 4 seasons of fighting. Before you reach for chemicals, reach for knowledge, because most often the solution lies literally right under your nose and for free. The hardest part is believing that something so simple can work, but it does. And how? In conclusion, I want to say one thing. The mole cricket is a serious challenge, but it's certainly no reason to give up or sell your plot. As you've already understood, the grandpa's method with fish in the corners is no magic. It's a precise mechanism based on the pest biology. It's simple, accessible to everyone, and most importantly, completely safe for your family and your pets. I myself once stood in despair over destroyed seedlings, but Grandpa Vassal's advice changed everything. What seemed to me like a gardening disaster became a valuable lesson. Sometimes the simplest solutions, which lie right at our feet, work better than expensive, advertised chemicals. Grandpa Vassal was 100% right. The mole cricket left my plot and hasn't returned for the fourth year now. And I proudly pass this secret on to you now because I know how much it hurts to lose the fruits of your labor to one insolent insect. The second conclusion I drew from this story: do not underestimate old people and their methods. In the era of Google and YouTube, we forget that generations before us dealt with the same problems, just without the internet and without gardening supermarkets. And they often handled them better than we do. Don't put this off until later. Try applying this method this coming weekend. Even if it seems to you that there are no mole crickets around, prevention never hurts. Share this video with your neighbors because fighting a pest together is much more effective than doing it alone. Let your garden become a place of joy again, not a battlefield. Trust my experience, your harvest will be saved. In the fall, you will remember these tips as you gather buckets of large, healthy tomatoes and potatoes. Good luck in the garden beds, and may no pest dare to raise a paw against the fruits of your labor. And how do you fight the mole cricket? Do you have your own family secrets passed down from generation to generation? Be sure to write about it in the comments. Your experience could save someone's harvest. And remember, you'll find more Grandpa's gardening tricks right here. Take care of your soil, and it will repay you 100-fold. See you in the next video. If this story changed the way you look at uninvited guests in your garden, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave a thumbs up. We uncover the secrets of nature and history that others have tried to hide underground. Together, let's sow a better future. Another treasure of knowledge will be discovered very soon.